Good, every, Good morning, everyone. My name is Carly Gonzalez, and I am the Manager of Member Relations for the Association for Data and Cyber Governance. I'd like to welcome you to today's webinar, Securing the Documents for the 21st Century Using Digital Signatures, AI, and Blockchains. I would like to now introduce Carlos Solari, who is the chair of the advisory group for the Association for Data and Cyber Governance, ADCG. He was formerly a U.S. Army officer, senior executive with the FBI, CIO for the White House in 2002, and has also had an extensive career in the private sector. Carlos is presently Vice President for Product Engineering for a startup called SecureG, involved with bringing security to the evolving 5G and IoT market.
Thank you, Carly. And it's my great pleasure to introduce Sham Shahadi, CEO and co-founder, who's going to take us through a fairly extensive dive into securing documents, the transition from the 20th century, the 21st century now, where we see these new capabilities in digital signatures, artificial intelligence, and blockchain is some of the means and technologies and techniques that can help us move and improve on how we secure our documents. Sham, I would ask if you would spend a couple of minutes in giving us a little bit of your background as an entrepreneur, and particularly as the CEO and co-founder of ZoroSign. At the end of the presentation, we will bring it back to ask a couple of questions and do a bit of summary.
Great, thank you, Carlos, and good morning, everyone. Just a quick background on myself. I co-founded ZoroSign back in 2015 because there was a few things that I was looking at in the industry, the way things were moving. So that was why ZoroSign basically caught up. I am a tech entrepreneur, by DNA. I've always enjoyed working in this space. I have lived all over the world, so I have been lucky to have an international flavor and perspective in a lot of things. One of my core beliefs is necessity is the mother of invention. So I feel anything that I do, I have to improve its efficiency, but never at the expense of security or making one vulnerable. So now I'll just, that's basically a brief background on myself, and let me get straight into the presentation. So once again, thank you very much, everyone, and good morning. Today, I would like to share some expertise, some knowledge that I have, and experience that I have in securing documents in the 21st century, and specifically looking at using digital signatures, AI, and blockchain. One small thing that I wanted to just quickly add on to my little intro of myself, I am a subject matter expert in blockchain, and I have been working with the House of Representatives and the Senate in giving testimony in different areas on these areas as well. So I'll be throwing in a little bit of experience there as well while I'm presenting today. So, when we talk about all these, these buzzwords, AI, blockchain, security, ML, it gets really confusing. And, there's a lot of different takes to all of this. So my goal today is to really make it a little easier for all of you and dive a little bit deeper into some areas, but most importantly, try and clear up any of the understandings that you may have and put it into perspective. So what we'll do right away is, when we start is, we will put out a definition. And so that'll be the premise that we'll be using throughout this presentation. And so the question is, what is document security? So the definition that we'll be using today is, it is the means of which documents are stored, filed, backed up, processed, delivered, and eventually disposed of when no longer needed. and you'll understand why I wanted to put the definition out at the beginning, is so then you'll see through the points that I'll be raising why all these points are very, very valuable and important in today's day and world in the 21st century. So why is security important? Well, most of our data, our personal data, or what we call PII, personal identifiable information, is on these documents, and this is all sensitive data, and this belongs to us. The second point is most documents are not stored in a safe and secure manner, and that's why we fall into malicious attacks like WikiLeaks. So it's just like not locking your door or your windows of your home at night, and that's just how, unfortunately, we don't always, or the companies that manage our documents and data don't always have the right processes, knowledge, or more important, they don't follow the right protocols to do that. Unsecured documents are easily accessible to third parties, and that is something that, again, if we leave things out in the open, others can pick it up and see it. So we need to focus on how to ensure that we are securing ourselves and protecting our valuable data. Even from a document storage standpoint, if it's not managed, if it's not monitored, it gets muddled up, it gets jumbled up, and then that results in time-consuming retrieval processes as well. So it's just imagine yourselves in your office. If you're not filing your documents away properly, it can become a big mess. And then looking for documents when you need it is going to take time, and it can sometimes cause losses in not finding data. So it'll be financial losses and time loss. And basically, overall, a lot of products out there or solutions out there say that they're in security, or you have 100% trust, and and things like that. But when you really dig deep down, and if you really go into asking them the tougher questions about what are your protocols, are you following industry standards, do you have the right accreditations, that's when you'll find out that a lot of laws are outdated. That's from the government side, but even from internally from a company, the methods that they've used to initially develop their software or encrypt the data, and things like that, they may not be adjusting with time. And that's the same thing with laws as well. If they don't adjust with time, then obviously that's when we start seeing these type of hacks and issues. So, I've talked about attacks. So what are the common attacks that normally happen? First of all, data breaches. This is basically when data is out of the control of or out of the control of the custodian. So whoever is holding your data, somebody's taken it over, and now it's available to an unauthorized entity. Impersonation attacks are the second one. So malware that may come through email or onto your device. If you click on the wrong link and on your browser, and then basically they take over your identity, your digital identity, and then try and get as much advantage as they can impersonating you. DOS attacks basically shut down machines or networks, and then basically paralyze us if if done correctly, and that has a lot of repercussions to day-to-day businesses. Web attacks. This is another one where these programs are written to basically probe our computers and exploit these holes and vulnerabilities of ours. These are done without our knowledge, so we think we're just basically doing our day-to-day checking of our emails and doing our work, but actually there is someone else that is breaking down our infrastructure, our network, and using our vulnerabilities that may be out there. And finally, an SQL injection. This is a little bit more complicated, but this is where these attackers, they interfere with our applications, and and then obviously they have a goal to address that they want to achieve when inside our networks and our infrastructure. And this is basically an area that we should also make sure that we are not at risk of. So when using a solution online, and I recommend a digital signature solution when you're working with your documents and your data, and this is the space that we're in. So I would like to share with you about 5 points that one should look for when choosing a solution out there. And this is especially relevant to today's day and age. So, earlier one may have looked at price, and price is obviously always a point that one should consider. But it's not only price anymore. It's not only convenience anymore. It's a lot more to it. And if we do our research correctly, if we ask the right questions, then sometimes paying a little bit more is not a bad thing, because there's a lot more benefit coming to it. So I'm going to break it down into 5 areas and just do a deeper dive on each one, and then I'll be happy to answer any questions as and when they pop up in this webinar. So the 5 areas that I recommend that one should look at is artificial intelligence based user onboarding. The second is a company or a solution that uses blockchain. The third is using knowledge-based authentication. The fourth is artificial intelligence-based document information validation. And the fifth one is digital signature using PKI, public key infrastructure. So let's start with the first one. So what I'm going to be basically doing is sharing with you how the current systems work, how this recommendation is stronger, and then we can go into the pros and cons. So the current methods of onboarding a customer is just based on email, a mobile number, or username and password. So what does that mean? If someone wants to send you a document or a form to sign, you just get an email saying that, hey, XYZ has sent you a document, click here to sign. So it's basically sent to an email address. We really don't ask the right questions, as in, is that the right email address? Is it the right person that we want? And we also don't check if it is the person on the other side. If it is that person, could it be their personal assistant? Could it be someone else that is authorized or unauthorized to sign on their behalf? We also may send a link through an SMS OTP that says, hey, someone has sent you a document, John Doe has sent you a document, please click here to sign. Again, mobile numbers, is that number hijacked? Is it is it the right person? And then the same thing is with username and password. If you're sent a document and you just have to put in the username and password, is that password just known to the user, or is it something that's generic or shared amongst more than one individual? So these are the type of methods that are used today. So why should we use an AI-based onboarding methodology? Why? Because first, the system checks if the user is a human. So we already knock out the idea of it being, a bot or a script. And we talked about some of the security attacks earlier. So we knock out all of those computer-generated automated methods that could be impersonating an individual. If you use an AI-based onboarding methodology, you can even ask for someone to prove their identity using government-issued IDs or passports, and things like that. You can also use a face, so you can get deeper into it. And that's basically looking at liveness, making sure that that person is behind the screen that you have sent the document to, and then they're accessing it from. Voice is another methodology. So if you use that sort of biometrics on the onboarding, then you also have voice verification. And then finally, everyone has a smart device today. So when you use an AI-based methodology, you're also using that device as part of that onboarding process. So there is a lot of information that's on that device. We recommend that you don't use a solution that stores all that information that's on your device on their servers. Let it be secured on the encrypted device itself, but let the device be part of the process. So That also helps when, if your account is, taken over and, it's accessed in some other part of the world, well, then that's when notifications come up that, hey, your account's been accessed in, somewhere that is literally the opposite side of the world from you, totally out of the norm. You've never visited that place. So how can it be you? So these are methodologies that will obviously secure yourself and your account. So we talked a little bit about the methods and how they're unsecure. I talked about how emails can be hacked, phone numbers can be spoofed, usernames and passwords. A lot of times they're generic, and we like to write them down, a lot of us. So that is, again, an area that will, decrease the security levels that we use to secure ourselves. And the current methods are used or not updated because it's ease of use. Users are wanting to do everything quick, easy, and fast. But that doesn't mean that it's the right thing. And that's just because we've been shown that this is the way that it should be done. And a lot of us are not asking those right questions there. There's also, the laws are also not updated. And so, like, for example, the e-signature law, it's 20 years old. It's not evolved. It's like a dinosaur in this industry. Everyone has an e-signature that you can place. You can even create it on your iPhone or your Android. And it's just basically a picture of your signature. But it's not evolved in this period of time. And it's something that should definitely be looked at. There's also a high cost to develop these or upgrade these softwares. So a lot of these software companies don't like to share too much about security, privacy, and a lot of these things, because they may either have to redo their software, meaning they have to build it out again, or they have to spend a lot of money, which today, if the industry is not, or the users are not asking them to improve their security, to improve the processes. So if they're not being asked, then they're letting the status quo run. And we basically also went over the benefits of why AI methods are more secure and should be used, and customers or users of these solutions should force their this discussion amongst themselves, and also push these solution providers to really go down this route, because number one is, now you're going to be more secure, and there's going to be more confirmation that you are transacting with the intended user and that user is validated. The mobile device is another authentication tool, so that'll also help in ensuring and securing that account. There's a lot more encryption. I don't think anyone will complain about having more security or encryption in the way they do business today, especially with the amount of data and personal data or company data and documents that are getting exposed and coming out into the wrong hands. These advanced security protocols are always updated because there's always something new that comes out. So when you use some of the latest technology, they're always open or adaptable to updating the protocols. And a lot of the times it comes at a much easier and quicker and even cheaper way of doing it. When you use AI, it's the technology is evolving over time, just like how blockchain is. So it's getting closer and closer to impossible to impersonate people. So when you build, when the technology becomes smarter and it continues to grow, this is where you'll start seeing that a lot of times these questions are not asked anymore, because it's just evolving. Everything is becoming better, more secure, faster, smarter. Privacy is protected. I don't think anyone will say, I don't want my data to be protected. And this is now the big thing about the 21st century. User privacy is a must, and it has to be, in my opinion, the number one number one principle that everyone should be following: privacy first. There's limited or no training when you upgrade to these type of technologies, because we use it on a day-to-day basis anyways on our smart devices and these are getting incorporated within the operating systems and things. So if they're being used already, or if they're being incorporated in the devices that we're using, then why aren't they being incorporated in the solutions that we are also using to transact on a day-to-day basis? And then also with some of this latest technologies, the cost of maintaining systems, upgrading is coming down as well. And that's what we've been seeing over the last few years. And so that's another great thing that, hopefully over time, costs will reduce from what you're paying today, and you'll still get a better, safer, and more secure product. The second point that I wanted to talk about and that we quickly looked at is blockchain. Blockchain is not Bitcoin. I think Bitcoin is just a drop in the ocean when compared to blockchain. And using blockchain-based technology on a platform will basically give the following characteristics, which are very, very important in today's day and age, in my perspective. The first point is the distribution. It helps with the prevention of the loss of data in case of a disaster or a failure of hardware and software. I think we've all experienced this. A USB gets corrupted, an external hard drive, back in the day, a CD got scratched, whatever it is. You may even be on a cloud, and by mistake you delete something, be it on Dropbox or anything, whatever it is. Even on our laptops or our phones, something crashes and you have to reformat the phone or your laptop. When you're putting everything on the blockchain, there is there is a very low chance of your data, or close to impossible, where your data gets lost, because it's kept in a methodology, it's kept in a way where it's distributed, so then you don't really have an issue with having it lost. The second thing is immutability. Every change you make, those documents are recorded, and we can't mutate it. We can't modify it. We can't make any changes to it. And that is very important, because then when we look at an audit of the document, and when you look at and we always recommend that the blockchain technology has an audit trail and has a chain of custody that is part of the solution. So when you basically look at at that solution, then you'll be able to see that all your data, all your documents are in a position or are stored and kept in a way where it's immutable. All blockchain technologies have an audit trail, but it's not always visible to the user. So that's when I meant when we look at having a solution that has an audit trail, is to make sure that you as a user can see it, so it's not only kept in the background. This chronological record order keeping and time stamping is the next aspect. So all transactions, there is a record that is kept in the audit trail, in the chain of custody. So this is also very important, especially from a legality standpoint. You always want to know who had access to it, who did what at what date, what time. So if there's ever a question that comes up, who had it, or who signed it first, or who edited the document first, so that ambiguity is out of the question there. This is a trustless operation, so everything runs by rules, rules-based rights. So users don't need to worry about should I trust this solution, or should I trust blockchain, because everything has to follow the principles. It cannot be modified. It cannot be diverted unless the solution allows it to. And then even if it does allow it to, then the audit trail is captured, the chain of custody is captured. So just like how you have your manual-based processes in your offices or in your work, this is a digital version of it, but this definitely makes sure that it goes to the right person, it's stored in the right place, and like I said, it follows very strict rules. Lastly, it's cryptographically sealed. This is something that is, is definitely not in the market if you're, in a solution, if you're not using blockchain. There are sophisticated methods of encryption that blockchain brings into place, hashing technologies, and most importantly, these are very, very advanced methods of what is out there today. So this is one of the biggest advantages that you have with using blockchain. So current technologies, data is kept in in databases, in methods that can have risk of data theft. And one of those we saw recently was Capital One back last year. There is a risk of data manipulation. So if a server gets corrupted, a virus comes in, whatever happens, if you are keeping it in the traditional methods or formats of storing data, then this is where we could potentially have issues of manipulation. Hardware and software can fail. This could be for whatever reason, but I think we've all experienced that. And this is, again, if that happens, then data potentially can be compromised because we don't know what happened or happens to the data when there's a failure. When you store everything in large databases, this data and documents, there's a lot of maintenance service issues that may also come up. Servers may hang. A lot of data needs to be transferred or accessed through the internet, and these things also slow our technologies down. And in the past, lower security methods and standards were used. So these are some of the areas that the current technologies are following. And now let's talk about how blockchain basically improves that. Data, number one, and most importantly, is stored in advanced cryptographic methods. A lot of the times it's not retrievable by humans at all. So I talked briefly about Capital One, the issue that we had last year. That data would not be able to be accessed by an employee and then basically take it out of the premises of the organization. Users can have full trust that there's no manipulation or loss of data because you are not risking yourselves to hardware or software failures. Solutions that run blockchain are generally faster because it uses the latest technologies, uses different ways of storage, of security, of encryption, and generally, technology is evolving over time. So if you're using a solution that has blockchain technology in it, then generally you will see a lot of it running faster and more secure. And then finally, just like how we talked about earlier as well, standards are evolving, technology is evolving. So with blockchain, every time something new comes up, those are things that will evolve and they'll be incorporated within the solution. So then potentially what we're seeing now is solutions that are using blockchain will always be up to date, always be present. So it'll not be like, oh, I'm using blockchain today and now there's a new version of blockchain. So now does my current blockchain solution become old or stale? We don't see that issue happening because everything would just evolve over time altogether. The third area is KBA, knowledge-based authentication. So if you use KBA, it basically invokes asking questions. A lot of times it's multiple choice questions to the users where it is personal, it is only they would know, and then it makes it harder for attackers to guess. So these are not very easy questions to ask, where something that you could pick it up from your social media accounts and things like that. These are very, this is data that is stored by the government and gives certain companies access to it, and then those companies then work with solutions to basically help verify and validate and also authenticate users. KBA can be used with two-factor authentication as well. during login, and when users sign documents or update forms. And so that is now additional advanced methods of using biometrics to secure your account and authenticate users. And like I said, they're integrated with government entities and databases. So the government always tries to keep that information in the most secure manner as well. So there's always a level of enhanced security there, because that's where all the critical data is also kept. So solutions that don't use KBA are weak because they basically verify and validate users using email and passwords. And and we've talked about how weak that is earlier, and users are also not validated. So if it's only a username and password, if that has been written down and come into someone else's eyes or shared with a loved one or a work colleague, now whenever something comes to me, I'm not sure if it is the right person that is actually signing or executing that document, because we really don't know if that permission has been given, or if it's a device that has been attacked or taken over by malware. We don't even know if it's a bot or another individual. KBA is not used in solutions out there, a majority of the solutions out there. Why? Because there's a lot of cost that is required to build out these softwares. That development takes time. There's significant changes, there's upgrades. Software have to also comply to now new levels of privacy and security. Terms and conditions have to change, privacy policies have to change for these current software providers. And these are all a lot of work, a lot of effort, but most importantly, costs. And if users are not asking for these type of upgrades to solutions or to the products, then the companies or the providers are not really pushing to do this on a voluntary basis. So so again, try and look out for solutions that have KBA, and they're stronger because, first of all, the user is validated. And this is, they're validated before they have access to your documents, before they have access to data that you want to share with them, because a lot of time your personal data is there as well. So if it is not the right person, then why should somebody else have access or see your data? Now, just imagine you've sent over a health, a form that has some of your personal health records in it. Why should someone see what medication you're having if they're not the right person to have access to it, if they're not your doctor? So that's just an example. This high level of trust is now added to working or transacting digitally. And I think that's more now, these are the type of questions that users should be asking is, how can I trust the solution? How can the solution make me feel more comfortable? And how can the overall digital experience of working online, really give me that comfort as we work into the 21st century? KBA can be used in multiple areas, even just logging into your account, but also having access to it, or even once having access to the document or data, then pushing it further down the line through to the next steps of who this data has to continue on to. Questions are also dynamic, so it's not the same set of questions. So it's not like your password, where it's the same password that you have to put in every time, and if you don't put in that password, then you can't get forward. These questions are dynamic, so there's a whole bunch of questions. Most of the times questions don't get repeated unless unless there's limited data on yourselves, or you extensively use it, but this information just keeps changing. So it's not the same thing like as a password, where it's the same thing. If you know it once, then you can keep getting into the account. You can also link KBA with other forms of multi-factor authentication, with face, with voice, with biometric, even with your smart device, so to ensure other levels of authentication. The fourth area is intelligence-based document information validation. So what is this? It's basically validating user information that's filled in the document before the changes are made. This is important. Why? Because we want to make sure that all the data or that's filled out in documents and forms is filled out by the right person. The second thing is that you can automatically map questions to ensure documents and fields in documents and forms are filled completely. So basically what we're saying here is no more documents or forms that are not filled out completely, that need to go back and forth to ensure that we've missed out something. AI can also automate the form filling with full accuracy. So you save a lot of time, maybe just with a click of a button, things get auto-filled. This is not the same thing as the auto-fill that you have on your browser, because that's all data that's stored on your browser, and I'm sure you've all experienced it's not always right. It not always gets fills out everything correctly. This is actually using artificial intelligence to read the forms, to read the questions, to read the fields that are there, and then using the data that you have in your, in the past, the answers that you've answered in the past, using all of that and then accurately filling it out. AI-based, AI can also be used to automate your workflows, generating your workflows, validating your workflows. So workflows is basically your digital process to make sure that everything is in a chronological order. It follows the rules, and this is again important because then you don't want it to go, via versa, other people, or have it in the wrong eyes or in the wrong hands. So solutions that don't use AI, DIV, are weak because information is not validated prior to form filling. So again, your data is risked by potentially being in the wrong hands. Wrong information can also be filled in the autofill. So if you're not paying attention, then wrong information, like I said, will be auto-populated. Solutions don't use AI DIV because, again, maintenance and cost of development or embedding this into their solutions is expensive, but also sometimes not possible with the technology that they're using because it may be very old and not updated. And then once you look to implement this into your solutions, then compliance and from a privacy and security really changes. So you have to now also enforce a lot more things. If you use a solution that has this, it's definitely stronger. Why? Because your PII is protected. Your personal identifiable information is protected before the user has access to it, and also validated when form filling. The correct information and the authorized information is auto e-filled. So that obviously is important because you want the right information to be there. These documents can be digitized in seconds. So a lot of times one may have a PDF document or a form, and then you try and digitize it. It could take hours, and a lot of us don't have that time of day to do that. And even when you digitize it through the traditional methods, those forms are not accurately digitized anyways. With AI, these forms become forms and documents become smart forms and documents, and it's much more advanced than current methods like OCR today. Privacy and security is enforced. I mentioned smart documents or forms. So just to give you an example of that, they become smart. How? Because they know last name and family name and surname is basically the same thing. A lot of current technologies, they're not able to figure that out, and that's just because there's old methods of reading forms, mapping forms, and things like that. And most importantly, I think today when you use a technology like this, the power is in your hands. The power to make sure that your data is going to go to a person that you trust, and they should be part of the process. And it's not something that without your consent or without your knowledge, or filled without without you even knowing that, or filled inaccurately. These type of issues don't pop up then. Finally, the last point that I wanted to bring up here is look for a solution that has digital signatures with public key infrastructure, so PKI. Digital signatures basically enforce document security and non-repudiation. So this is the next level of e-signature, which, like I said, e-signature is a 20-year-old technology. It uses users own their private key, and the private key never leaves its home. The home is basically the user's mobile device. So it basically is like a padlock type of technology, a key in a lock. So the key belongs to the user, and no one else has access to that key. The public key is transferred to the solution servers. Third parties can verify the user using their public key. So you have your own private key, but then there's also a digital imprint of your public key, and that is what you can share with third parties, with other solutions, so they can verify you. So that's also done in a secure and encrypted manner, so then you don't have issues later on where having multiple accounts to verify yourself. KBA would be one, maybe AIDIV would be another. But you could use it, you could set up one account, and then that could represent you through other third parties. So then you don't have to worry about your data being available to all, access to all. It's all secure in one safe place with just one key to have to open that door and have access to it. I talked about the user can have more than one key pair. If you have different devices, in case of a device is lost, or you upgrade or update your devices, or scenarios change. So just how I explained the public key, that gets addressed here as well. And I also talked briefly about how the user becomes the sole owner of the documents and the transactions, and that's bringing more power back to the users. That's something that was generally not enforced back in the 20th century, where companies or solution providers wanted to control that data, wanted to use that for selling or financial gains, or building up capacity. But now, if you use this type of technology, or a solution that has this type of technology, then the power comes back to you as the user. So solutions, I think this is now going to become very obvious. Solutions without using PKI technology are weak, because we've talked about how weak username and passwords are. It's the lowest form of security, and data accessibility and usability is not solely in your hands. It's in the hands of the other solutions that you use. For example, social media companies, they basically have access to your data, your photos, anything else that you do. So I'm not sure why we all like to do that, in terms of letting others have access to it, where it should technically be ours. But a lot of times that's also because terms and conditions are not read for usage of that technology. So PKI is not used in solutions, because development and maintenance of of these solutions, again, are the biggest thing. It's the cost. And then compliance. Compliance is something that has not been talked about a lot. GDPR was one of the biggest privacy regulations that came out of the EU, and that's when customers or users started questioning the technologies that they're using, and a lot more countries, states, even companies are now starting to follow and update their laws and their protocols and processes that they may have internally within an organization, after GDPR was enforced. And this is a great thing, because that everything comes back to you. The power comes back to the user. So why should we use technologies? I think I've answered most of these already, because user would own the data, and it's their sole and complete right to have access to that that document and data, and only give it to whom they want to give it to as and when they want to give it. There'll be no unauthorized access to documents or data. So, manipulation or hacking of your information would not take place. Privacy is maintained at all times. So it's yours and always be yours. Security can be enforced on multiple devices. So it's not only like where the key is only linked to one device. It can be on your tablet, your phone, your laptop, and so forth. Software updates can be done over the air. So you don't have to keep updating, go to the App Store and click update and, all those type of things. This is all done from the solution provider side. And like I said, it can be done over the air. So it really doesn't have to bother you, and you don't have to, keep going back and updating everything. And it's also now used as a method of non-repudiation. So there's a trust, there's no ambiguity there. If it is that person, we can definitely prove it using PKI. So in summary, companies, they sell weaker, cheaper, and sometimes easier to use solutions. Why? Because laws are outdated or non-existent in today's day and age. And this is an area that, hopefully governments around the world will start focusing on and improving. Enforcement agencies are not able to hold companies accountable due to various laws or lack of laws in different countries. Users are not demanding or boycotting companies or solutions that don't empower the user or don't give the data back into your hands. Upgrading latest technologies are costly, and they require complying with higher levels of audit. There's an attitude in the market that why change things if everything's working? It's a common trend. It's not only in the tech space, but I think that is something that needs to change now, especially when it's all very, very critical. It's our data. It's everything that belongs to us. We don't do that with our homes, so why should we do that with our data? And then there's also a lack of trusted education that's out there. When one tries to Google things, one tries to look up, blockchain, security, privacy. There's a lot of, paid information that's out there that can be, incorrect. I'm not saying that it's always that case, but a lot of times it could be paid content and things like that, and less of, webinars like we're doing today, and experience and knowledge sharing. And that's why I'm thankful for this opportunity today. So lastly, just to let you know, recommendation is research, identify, and use solutions that have all or some of these key features to ensure that the power comes back to you, basically meaning security, privacy, and ownership of these documents are yours. So thank you.
Excellent. And thank you, Shamsi. I do have a few questions. Listening to this very thorough, very complete explanation of where we have been, where we are, and what needs to change, I'm struck by a couple of things, and maybe you can comment on these. The first is really the urgency. We have so much already in place in terms of business activities, real estate, in the real estate market, in government, that is currently using digital signatures with an expectation that it is secure. The reality is that it's not. It's unprotected, particularly so that the threats, the sophistication of attackers has grown so significantly, and we find ourselves really needing to update not only the technology but the laws. But really, it's incumbent upon us, wouldn't you say so, upon us who are the clients, who are the users of these technologies, to ask the questions that you've been talking about, to do the research, and to really examine really whether the digital signature methodologies that are being used are applying the right technologies to protect us. Would you agree with that?
I totally agree with that. I think it's now the right time where the users, us as the users, are really pushing the large corporations, the product companies, even the governments, to really hold themselves accountable and also implement the latest technologies. I know from a government standpoint, it may not be done overnight, but at least if the discussions are starting to take place, which we are seeing, especially in the United States, and if technologies are evolving, then obviously we protect ourselves. And if we can protect ourselves from top down or bottom up, both ways are important. And I think we should push as users it to happen as quick as possible, and both ways, top down and bottom up.
Excellent. The second point is again struck by the 5 different methods, the technologies, the methods that you presented. How it's not one of these alone. There's no real silver bullet here. It's really a combination of these methods and technologies that together need to be applied in order to really meet the threshold of being able to provide the protection that's required, back again towards the recognition that the threat has really gotten fairly sophisticated, and we need all of these things together. Is that right?
Yeah, and I think that's what I was trying to hit home here is that it's not just one thing that we should just say, oh, just find, like you said, just find a blockchain technology to answer my security and privacy question. It's not a one size fits all answered here. We have to really look at the way technologies are evolving, and a lot of things are coming up, new ideas are coming up in ML and AI, and these are all complementary. And if we are open-minded, and if we look at it, and if we use the right type of research and experience sharing, and then most importantly are able to incorporate that with the high levels of advanced security and encryption, then we'll see this evolution happening over time. And I think that's a great thing to see that. And the beauty about these technologies, like I've said earlier, is this evolves itself. So it's not going to be update and replace and spend a lot of money, to find the next solution that's out there. Once you've found your comfort with the right solution, then you'll naturally see that evolving over time, because these are already forward-thinking companies that are using technologies that are going to evolve over time.
And one last point, Shams. At the beginning, you gave an explanation of why these, let's say, older methods that are really insufficient today still persist, and one of those being the friendliness or the efficiency of how they get applied. And so that will always be a requirement. If it's too complicated, too difficult to use the proper protections. So speak a little bit, if you will, and we'll close with this, about how ZoroSign has implemented these methods of protection, but at the same time made it so that it remains friendly, and the efficiency in the background is taken care of through the integration.
Thank you so much for that great question. We don't get this a lot, so I enjoy answering this question. Obviously, ZoroSign being, a product company out there, and just like a lot of, our competitors, but also in the tech space, we build products for users to use. The user experience is obviously, important, as well as allowing the user to do what they want to do. And that's why we're out there. That's why we survive. Obviously, making sure that it's easy to use, efficient, and allowing you to address your daily need is important. But ZoroSign, I think, has come up with very, very innovative ways. We've patented a couple of technologies or methods as well to basically give you all of that you want as a user, which is transact online, easy to use, understand, available, on browser, on mobile, or on your, through apps. We've been able to provide all that to the user, and most importantly for us, like our tagline is, because trust is everything. We've been able to give you security, privacy, and user verification, authentication. Why? Because we're following some of these these steps right down to the core, and our technology is built ground up on the blockchain. So for us to evolve over time will be very easy. So we can always ensure that our users always have the best experience, but most importantly, can sleep at night and let us do all the worrying to make sure that their data is secure and private, and maintained in the highest levels of confidentiality with for them, and ultimately giving them the key to owning all the data which we don't see, we don't use, or we don't have access to.
Excellent. Well, thank you, Shams. And for our audience who gets a chance to listen to this, really encourage everyone to join the association. You go to the website, www.adcg.org, and that's the place where companies like ZoroSign are joining, becoming part of the members that where the body of people, both on the compliance side, governance, risk and compliance, business leaders, cybersecurity specialists, providers of technologies can come together and share these experiences and learn about what needs to be done so we can have a better future, a better protected future. Thank you again to everyone. And with that, we will close.
Thank you.